Is the market far ahead?
Just past the square.
America in the 1830s. Seen from above, it appeared as a young nation in full bloom. Territories were expanding. Cities were rising, and the promise of progress seemed unstoppable. But if you looked closer, down among the carriage wheels struggling against the thick mud of unforgiving streets, a different reality took shape. It was a world of brutal contrasts, where the dawn of industrialization collided with a crushing human fragility. Civilization was in its infancy, yet a profound weariness hung over every street corner. The spirit of liberty still bore the bloody scars of a recent past. The War of 1812 was not a distant memory, but a wound that had never fully healed. The flag for which so many had perished had become the symbol of a nation still searching for its identity through sacrifice and violence. Soldiers returned home, not as triumphant heroes, but as men branded by the fire of battle and the roar of cannons, carrying heavy questions about the meaning of life and the true price of freedom. Upon this social unrest fell the sinister silence of disease. When cholera struck, tearing through New York, Philadelphia, and the burgeoning urban centers, life simply froze. The streets emptied, commerce ground to a halt, and abandoned carts left in the middle of the road became mute witnesses to despair. Death no longer made distinctions. It reaped the poor and the wealthy alike, leaving behind a heavy stillness, thick with fear and helplessness. Inside the homes, beneath the dim flicker of candlelight, families huddled together. They gathered not to celebrate, but to survive one more night. Their prayers were no longer routine whispers, but cries of anguish. With the Bible open on the table, parents and children alike searched for an explanation for the suffering that surrounded them. Where is God in the midst of this pain? This became the question that haunted every heart and mind. And so, an entire generation was left with only one thing to do: to look up. With faces etched by tears and hearts filled with both dread and longing, thousands raised their gaze toward the heavy, clouded sky. They were searching for a sign, a light. They did not yet know who would bring them the answer.
Out of this vacuum of meaning, a voice emerged. It was not the voice of a self-proclaimed prophet, but that of a skeptical farmer, deeply scarred by the horrors of the War of 1812. William Miller was not seeking glory. He was searching for truth among numbers and ancient visions.
It all connects.
For years, he retreated into the study of the biblical text, driven by a veteran's need for order and certainty. His focus narrowed on a single cryptic passage. Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Miller's mathematics were cold, but his conclusion was incendiary. He calculated that the timeline of human history was reaching its final chapter. Christ was coming, not in some distant century, but now. By 1844, the sky itself was expected to open. What began as a personal study in a quiet farmhouse soon turned into a public challenge to the status quo of a nation. The message spread like fire across dry fields. In an America already hollowed out by cholera and social instability, the idea that human suffering had an expiration date became the only available oxygen. This was no longer just a theory. It became a massive, organized reality. The commitment was absolute and objective. Across the Northeast, the gears of society began to grind to a halt. Hundreds of thousands of people sold their farms, left their churches, and looked toward the horizon. They were no longer just farmers or merchants. They were waiters. Their entire world was reduced to a single date on the calendar: October 22nd, 1844. But the sun rose on October 23rd over a world that had refused to perish. The sky remained like lead. The silence that followed was more painful than the roar of the cannons Miller had once faced. It was the great disappointment. Faith became an object of mockery, and hope turned to ash.
The date is nonsense.
In that cold morning, many returned to their devastated lives. But a handful of people remained on their knees, asking a single, piercing question. Where did we go wrong? From the ashes of this collapse, a spark remained. A 17-year-old girl of frail health saw what others could not, that the road had not ended, but was only beginning. Ellen White did not bring just comfort, but a new direction. It was not about the end of the earth, but about a work in the heavens. Adventism was not born from triumph,
It's the sanctuary from heaven.
but from the agony of a question left unanswered. This shift in focus changed everything. It transformed a movement based on an ending into a movement based on a mission. Ellen White's perspective provided a blueprint for a new way of living, one that emphasized health, education, and a disciplined preparation for a future that was still coming. What started as a cry of despair in a plague-stricken America evolved into a global institution. They no longer just waited for the end of suffering. They began to heal the world in anticipation of his return. The scars of 1844 remained, but they were no longer signs of failure. They were evidence of a faith refined by fire. The search for the light continues.